Like many nations in this unstable part of Africa, it's strife that's lifted Sierra Leone out of obscurity and into the world's view. Brutal civil war, thousands of children pressed into service as soldiers, mutilation as a weapon of intimidation. Now that war's over, another has begun, but this time the nation has to combat a very different, very deadly scourge, Ebola.
You know, considering the fact that I am going in an area that is currently affected by Ebola, it takes a man, you know, for you to go back.
Our cameraman Adam Bales is travelling with Red Cross worker Patrick Massaqua, who's returning to the Ebola battle zone despite the risk and the worries of his family.
You know, when you are back from this affected area, friends stigmatize you. Even when I went there for the first time, when I came back, my wife said, I mean, since you are coming from that place, you have to stay far off, you know, for 21 days. I have to really convince her. I have to show her pictures and the videos that even though we are involved in that, but we are highly protected, you know.
They're heading southeast towards the borders of Guinea and Liberia.
Very good morning, sir.
Yeah, Red Cross.
Yes.
How are you?
Yeah, no bad, thank you.
Okay.
Through the roadblocks and a long potholed stretch of road, it's a 12-hour drive to the town of Kailahun and an Ebola coordination facility on the front line of this African emergency. Once Foreign Correspondent's crew is through, this and other checkpoints will be closed to media as a national crackdown intensifies.
The environment in which people are living is absolutely a critical part of the effectiveness of the spread of this outbreak. People living in very basic housing with poor access to water, no ability to isolate themselves. There's very poor access to healthcare as well. But then there are all these cultural issues as well, such as a healthy mistrust of government, especially in some of these countries that have had very severe civil wars for many years. There's a lot of beliefs in black magic and I suppose traditional beliefs. So people often explain things through witchcraft and curses. And all those things come together, I suppose, with a disease like Ebola to result in these explosive outbreaks.
Ebola, Ebola, don't touch your friend, no touching, no eating something dangerous. Ebola, Ebola, don't touch your friend, no kissing, no eating something dangerous.
Dodo is a town of about 3,000, midway between Freetown and Kailahun. A large crowd's gathered. A Red Cross dead body management team has just arrived and they're suiting up in the middle of the main street.
They want to see what we are doing, especially the use of PPE.
They've been alerted a middle-aged man has died in his bed overnight.
He's 55 years old, and married with one wife and a child, boy child. He has been a bush, a farmer, and he can also cut palm nuts, yes, from the palm tree.
The Sierra Leonean government has decreed that any inexplicable death must be dealt with by designated authorities. Traditional community funerals are not allowed.
We are now going to the house and get the volunteers, the dead body management team, and then we'll proceed with the burial.
So while the circumstances of this man's death are unclear, his body is being handled as if he had died of Ebola. A sample will either confirm or eliminate Ebola as a cause. but the body will be sealed in plastic, doused with chlorine and taken away for burial. It's disturbing and confusing for the townspeople. Dodo hasn't experienced an Ebola death or any infections during this outbreak, and they don't want their town stigmatised.
Since no, we have not got any person die of Ebola.
No cases?
No case of Ebola.
The new emergency procedures are also causing a little consternation for local leaders here.
Yeah, I'm asking if he has died out of Ebola. That is my concern.
We are not saying that the cause of the death of this old man now is as a result of Ebola. But what normally they say is a probable case. Probable case. It might be, it might not be. That is why the government has said we should be doing the burial.
But I know this is the procedure, that we should not do the burial on our own. But because of the convoy, the way it looks, so fearful, and this is a new thing to the community people. So majority may have that in mind, whether they will be doubtful. Is this man not affected by Ebola also? Thank you very much.
Very happy.
Yeah. So no problem.
So you feel more informed?
Yeah, I'll be better informed.
One of the real problems with Ebola is that the most infectious risk is a dead body of someone who's died from Ebola. Now, that's a real challenge, again, in places like Sierra Leone, because often people would be dying in communities and they would be having traditional funerals. And I guess there are few better ways of spreading Ebola than a lot of the traditional funeral practices that go on in these remote parts of West Africa.
Well, I get one away common at the International Federation of the Red Cross. As an epidemiologist, what is Ebola?
Thank you. Ebola is a virus.
Australian Dr Richard Broome recently spent a month in Sierra Leone helping to streamline the Red Cross response to the Ebola outbreak. He's seen firsthand the emergency collide with customary practices.
For a Muslim funeral, for example, it's traditional to wash the body prior to burial. And again, so that would put a number of people in at risk. And then for some of the more tribal and remote areas, there would be very traditional burial practices such as wakes, where lots of people might come into contact with a dead body.
It's the wet season. Roads turn to quagmire and can become more difficult and dangerous. But locals find a way to get from one place to another. Out where national borders are porous, mobility is making the transmission of Ebola all the more difficult to contain. Kailahun is a market town of around 30,000 people at the centre of a region of almost 500,000. The commerce here makes it a magnet for people from neighbouring Guinea and Liberia. In this outbreak, the central focus of the fight against Ebola is here. Foreign correspondent has been granted special access to this crisis coordination centre, where patients are being tested and quarantined. It's run by MSF with help from the International Red Cross and the World Health Organization.
Said the squares on the board represent gives us the information on admissions, discharges, deaths.
It's where we find Australian psychologist Malcolm HUGO.
In the last week and a half to 2 weeks, there's been a significant increase in the number of cases coming here, and also a significant increase in the number of confirmed cases. People are scared. I guess that the kind of suddenness, the suddenness of the epidemic and the catastrophic impact it's had on small communities where whole families have virtually been wiped out. And for surviving members, whether it be a psychological or psychosocial response available to them. And, I mean, culture is obviously important, but sometimes these people tend to be neglected by their communities because of the stigma attached to it.
Malcolm's retired from his Adelaide practice and for the past decade has undertaken at least one international crisis assignment a year.
I've worked with one Ebola outbreak in Uganda in 2007. I've done 2 missions in the West Bank. I've worked in MDR TB, a drug-resistant tuberculosis program in Abkhazia, which is part of Georgia. I spent 6 months in Baghdad last year. I was in the Philippines following the typhoon over Christmas. I was in Haiti after the earthquake. I was in Aceh after the tsunami in 2004.
Could be 252, 253.
253.
Yes.
You come to pick up some bodies?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many will you be picking up?
9.
9. Busy day. Okay.
Far from here, there's an intense effort to develop a vaccine. The death rate for this strain is slightly lower than those of previous outbreaks, but most people admitted to this facility can expect to die. That makes Malcolm HUGO's work here vitally important.
I really think grieving and the way people respond to the death of loved ones is pretty universal. Obviously, people are really upset, and particularly when they can't do the things that they traditionally do when somebody dies.
When we are taking their temperature, whether they have fever, at least if it is 37.5 and above, so that one can give us clue about them.
In this outbreak, there's been confusion in communities about symptoms. They've been told a high temperature is one sign, but earlier health alerts also cited bleeding as another. As it transpires, bleeding is not an indicator with this strain.
It's 37.2.
But many people acting on the earlier advice assumed they were okay and didn't present for testing.
It's difficult to give bad news to patients, and I think some of the nurses understandably avoid doing this by just saying to patients, oh, you're going to be moved to a different section, rather than telling them why they're being moved to a different section, that they need to be isolated from the negative cases. Also, they're concerned about the reactions that they're going to get. Understandably, patients are going to be distressed when they hear this news, or in some cases they get a bit angry. So I guess it's just human nature to try and avoid that conflict.
It's here in a relatively open space, cordoned off by a plastic fence, a makeshift buffer zone, that infected patients wait for Ebola's crippling onset. They're given some pain relief and told to keep up their water intake. They can only hope to survive its 3-week attack phase.
It seems that in Sierra Leone at the moment, the mortality rate is somewhere in the order of 60%. And it's a virus that spreads through contact with people's body fluids. Essentially, the virus is one that just overwhelms your body's immune system and ability to cope, and as a result, you get your organs begin to fail, your blood vessels become leaky. So it's really just overwhelming, an overwhelming of your body by the virus.
For many still reeling from civil war, fear of Ebola is eclipsed by a fear of authority. Suspicion and superstition have been keeping people away.
Particularly when I first came here, lots of rumours about the activities here. There were rumours that body parts were being taken, or MSF were injecting people, and I've certainly met people that have come here, patients that have come here, that were in fear of we were going to take all the blood out of them, a whole range of things.
Despite the almost agricultural appearance of these facilities, safety protocols are strictly observed and policed. Everything that's spent time near or within the isolation zone is scrubbed and sterilised.
We wash many clothes.
Any clothes?
Many, over 1,000 suits.
And yet, among the more than 1,400 deaths so far in this outbreak, many have been among the volunteers and medical staff dealing with it. Across West Africa, about 170 have been infected. More than 80 have died. The busy, colourful city of Kenema is Sierra Leone's third largest and about 3 hours' drive from Kailahun, depending on the rain. It's home to a large government hospital, the scene of the nation's single biggest loss of medical staff to Ebola. 20 health workers died after contracting the virus. On the outskirts of the city, Amanda MCCLELLAND is overseeing the rapid construction of another Ebola coordination centre to take some of the pressure off Kailahun.
Okay, so what's happened, the resident minister has gone to the road construction company that's building the highway and is essentially forcing them to bring their machines and their staff down. The pressure and the speed that we need to move in the Ebola is something that we haven't felt before. Every day we waste, the epidemic continues to spread and is not under control. So it's an unusual situation and extremely concerning.
Amanda's a Queenslander who's leading the Red Cross response to Ebola in Sierra Leone. She's a nurse and tropical diseases expert, and like any other medical professional, she's worried about Sierra Leone's capacity to cope with and contain Ebola.
We've seen health workers make mistakes. A lady was full-term, pregnant, presented, seemed to be miscarrying. They took her to the maternity ward. They were taking care of a full-term miscarriage. And halfway through, they realised actually she was an Ebola patient and she was positive. Now, that one mistake, we've got 10 to 15 health workers that are possibly contaminated from that one case.
The race is on to get this new Ebola clinic up and running, but it will take several months. It's a devastating death rate, but 4 in 10 are surviving.
We have another 2 survivor cases.
Back at the Kailahun Crisis Centre, these teenagers have endured the normally lethal 21-day cycle of the virus and have just been cleared to leave the isolation ward.
She had Ebola. Her husband died here. Yeah.
They've survived, but they'll head back to their homes and into another ordeal.
I'm very happy.
Great.
There's still a lot of misunderstanding about Ebola in the community. Even though we have health educators, people still believe that because patients have been here, that when they go home, they may be contagious. There has been cases where people, when they've gone home, have been marginalised within the community, and there's been quite a stigma involved. So we just go home to make sure, yeah.
20% of the patients in Kailahun are under the age of 15. They're brought here because they're infected or the family members caring for them are infected. They can be difficult to handle.
The baby was positive and has been an inpatient for over 3 weeks. It was about 2 weeks ago the baby actually crawled under the fencing here and walked out into the middle of our compound, and I've never seen people scatter so quickly. She was just standing there with her hands on her hips, a little 2-year-old feeling quite powerful with the impact she had on all the people here. But somebody quickly suited up and picked her up and returned her to the compound.
That child is Lansana. She's now being cared for by one of the health workers at the MSF clinic, Mush Tia and Mush's husband, Abu Bakr Sese, at their home in Kailahun.
Yeah, so where I can then at that center, where I can see pikin they can lose their mama, they can lose their family, I can volunteer for taking them because I can feel disheartening where pikin can left this kind age, where they lost in mama.
Lansana came to the emergency centre with her parents. Her mother died, her father fights on. Ebola has claimed 17 members of her family.
They don't make some pikin and they now without them not get mama. Some families they all don't die. So it's very disheartening. Even now where na time this way pikin for they go school, pikin and not they go school. So I mean, it's very disheartening where this Ebola they don't they come to win aya.
Some communities that we've worked with have lost 30 or 40% of their population. Some of these places are quite small, and how do those communities then undertake agriculture in the future? What happens when the adult population has, been killed by Ebola and only the children are left? And we're seeing what we call almost Ebola orphans, where whole families have died and only the young children are left. So the impacts of this epidemic will be long-term in these countries.
I think the psychology is an enormous part of an Ebola outbreak, and not just for the people who are sick themselves, but also for the communities where they've come from. Making sure that they understand the nature of the illness in that person, and that once they've recovered, that they're not going to, be able to transmit the disease. The people who've recovered, one of the really important things is they can almost become ambassadors for the disease. They're the people who can give people most hope and use them as symbols of, success in this Ebola outbreak to try and change the overall psychology, I think, and people's view of Ebola.
Yesterday we had 10 deaths, which is a bit of a record for us. I've estimated around the 35, 40 mark in the last week, so it's been a difficult week for most people. I think the big concern is what's going to happen to the people here. First time in Sierra Leone that they've had this sort of experience. So it's a very new and frightening experience for people.